Good afternoon, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Karis Circle. Karis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books, and Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're thrilled to be here today with Amanda Plumb, who's one of our old ATLian friends. So excited to be celebrating her brand new book, celebrating unique eats and eateries of Atlanta. We love to see our friends in the chat. Hey, Becky Rafter. We would love for folks to shout out where you're watching from. We assume many of you are watching from the Metro Atlanta area, but wherever you are in the world, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know. We're going to have a very interactive event today, and we'd love for you to play along with us. So first, I'm going to introduce Amanda. If you don't know Amanda, Amanda loves food almost as much as she loves her adopted hometown of Atlanta. For several years, along with fellow members of the Buford Highway Supper Club, she explored the international dining options along that congested thoroughfare. In 2017, she co-founded Chow Club Atlanta, a monthly underground restaurant showcasing the talents of local home cooks with international roots. Chow Club Atlanta has been featured in Atlanta Magazine, the AJC, Creative Loafing, and other media. So the book we're here today to celebrate is really exciting, I think, for all of us who have been, pun intended, chomping at the bit to get out and eat at all of our favorite restaurants. It's also a celebration of restaurants gone by. So as a native Atlantan, there's some restaurants in this book that really reminded me of my childhood, that made me really miss some things. So I can't wait to get into this with you, Amanda. I am going to get out of the way so we can get started. But welcome, and thanks so much for helping launch this book into the world at Karis.
Thank you. Am I on now? Thank you so much, ER, and all of Karis for having me. There's no place else where I would want to have my virtual launch. Thanks to everyone who has signed in. See some great friends there. I also want to give a shout out. I see Kiki's on, and her partner Ria is on the cover. So thank you so much for joining. So I'm going to share some stories from the book, and then I thought we could play a little bit of trivia if you guys are up for that. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. Okay, can everybody see that? So I want to start with a little story. So when I was in 4th grade, my dad got offered a job in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So the whole family went down to Rock Hill to check it out, see if we might want to live there. And we were staying at the Howard Johnson, and we asked the woman at the front desk to recommend a good Chinese restaurant. And she said, Rigby's. And we said, Rigby's is a good Chinese restaurant? And she said, oh, I thought you said a good chain restaurant. Well, that story became an instant family classic because even though I was just in elementary school, I knew that if you wanted to get to know a place, you don't go to the chain restaurants. No, if you really want to get a sense of a place, you want to go to the mom and pop places, the places where they're unique eats. And so when we did move to Rock Hill, and there really wasn't a ton of diversity when it came to food. But when I moved to Atlanta, it was a whole nother story. Because Atlanta is the city of transplants. There's people from around the country and around the world who move here and make Atlanta their home. And our food scene really reflects that. And I think no place showcases that better than Buford Highway. And as ER mentioned, I had a group of friends. We called ourselves the Buford Highway Supper Club. And every month we would go up to Buford Highway and try a new restaurant and a new type of cuisine. We would just order a bunch of dishes for the table, and we'd all eat them. It was a place where we got to catch up with friends who maybe we hadn't seen at all that month, but also we got to learn about a new culture and try new foods. My friend Alex, right before he moved to New York City, I let him pick where we were going to go on Buford Highway. And he said he wanted Ethiopian food. Well, there's tons of great food on Buford Highway, places from all across Asia and Latin America, but there actually aren't a lot of Ethiopian places on Buford Highway. So I called up my good friend Johanna Solomon, who is from Ethiopia, and she's an amazing chef. She's runs a catering company called Kushina Catering. And I said, Johanna, where is the best Ethiopian food in the city? And she said, my house. And so we realized, maybe she should cook. So I had her over to my house, and she cooked dinner for my friends, and everybody loved it. And we did it again the next time we did an Ethiopian brunch. And that's when we realized we were onto something, and we started Chow Club, which is an underground supper club where every month we have a different chef, typically home cooks that live here in Atlanta, but they have international roots. So one month you may come, you're getting Nigerian food. The next month you're getting food from Laos. So it's all over the place. And people get to sit down with strangers, share a meal, and get to know about a place. And so you can say that I'm a foodie. And so when I got this invitation to write Unique Eats and Eateries of Atlanta, I was totally ecstatic because I love this city and I love our food scene. And it really is kind of my love story to the Atlanta culinary institutions that I love. So I do want to share a few stories from the book. Some of these are going to be places that you do know, especially if you're in Atlanta. Maybe you've been there a million times. And I'm hoping that in this book, even if you know a place really well, you're going to learn something new about it. And I hope you'll learn a few new places as well. So I'm going to share some stories. But one thing I want to do is I want to make this interactive. And I would like you guys to try to guess in the chat where I'm talking about. Okay? And I can't actually see the chat, so I'm just going to have to pretend like I can. All right, so let's get started with the first story. So this is the first story in the book, and it's the first story in the book because it was the first interview that I did. This is Matt Hinton, and he was an adjunct professor at Morehouse College. And I don't know if you know much about being an adjunct professor, but one of the not so great things about the job is if not enough students enroll for a class, then your class is canceled for the semester and you just don't get paid for it. And that's exactly what happened to Matt in 2008. He was scheduled to teach a religion class at Morehouse. Not enough people signed up. The class was canceled. And now he's short several $1,000s of income that he's counting on. He has to support his family. And so he's not really sure what he's going to do. Well, flash back to the 1990s, and Matt was a regular at this place called Tortillas. Do you guys remember Tortillas? Shout out if you remember Tortillas over on Ponce. I love that place. I remember going and getting like a bean and cheese burrito, and it was like $2.50. And they would add potatoes or rice for free to your burrito, which at the time I just thought was like so cool. Like I was really getting away with something. Now that I'm a little bit older and wiser, I realize that rice and potatoes are cheaper than meat, beans, cheese, anything else in the burrito. So they're actually saving money when you did that upgrade. But it was a really cool place. It was mission-style burritos. Everybody that worked there seemed to be tattooed. They all played in bands. It was just this really cool indie spot. And Matt, like a lot of us, was a big fan. And so he was heartbroken when Tortillas closed in 2003. In fact, so many people were upset that Tortilla closed that there was a huge line around the block on their last day. One guy bought like 52 burritos so he could freeze them and have one a week for the rest of the year. And as a consolation prize, Tortillas actually gave out the recipes to their burritos. So flash forward back to 2008 when Matt's trying to figure out how he's going to make up this money. And he dusts off those old recipes from Tortillas and he asks his friends if they'd be interested in, buying them from him. And about 50 people said yes and signed up for burritos. And so that first, week that he's making them, he's getting ready, cooking everything. He's making this big vat of beans and he burns the beans. So about an hour before he's supposed to start delivering, he has to throw out the beans and start all over again, which means he's super late. The last person gets their burrito at like 10 p.m., which is not great if you're expecting dinner. And it was just a horrible day. And the last thing he wanted to do was to do it again. But he did. He did it the next week and every week for the rest of the semester. I remember this because I ordered a couple of times. And what you would do is you'd find out on Facebook that he's doing it and you'd email him your order by Wednesday. And then on Monday night, he would deliver it. And you have to imagine, this is 2008. That's 2 years before Instagram. So these types of pop-ups were really not common at the time. So anyway, he does this for a whole semester and he can't wait until the next semester when he can go back to his full teaching course. Well, as you can imagine, he has the same problem the next semester. His class doesn't make enrollment. And now he's kind of got to figure out what to do because his burritos are getting really popular. They're getting written up in the paper. He's got a following. So he has to decide if he's going to quit or get legit. And he ends up deciding to get a space at Sweet Auburn Curb Market. He rents a little booth and he opens Bell Street Burritos. Did you guys guess that one? Well, one thing I didn't know is that the reason why it's called Bell Street Burritos is because there's this little street behind Sweet Auburn Curb Market that goes to the employee parking lot. And that street's called Bell Street. And that's why it's called Bell Street Burritos. So that's a little tidbit you can drop on folks. In my book, I also have tips for each restaurant. So one tip about going to Bell Street Burrito, it's on Fridays. Lydia, one of the cooks, makes tamales from scratch. They also have really good milkshakes, which is something you may not think of. All right. So, I try to think about what types of, restaurants to include in my book, because honestly, that was the hardest part about writing it, is narrowing it down to under 100 different places, because there's so much great food in Atlanta. And there's some places that are just so iconic that I felt like I had to include them. And so the next few are going to be some of these older institutions. So this one, I'm not going to tell you the last name of the person because that will give it away. So I'll just start with James. He was Robert. James is the brother. Robert was a soda jerk at Jacob's Drugstore, which was in Atlanta University Center down by the HBCUs. And he would have the students from, Morehouse and Spelman would come in and they would kind of grumble about the food on campus. And honestly, the food at the drugstore wasn't much better. He really wanted to open his own place, but he didn't have the kind of money for that. Luckily, his wife, Florine, had been saving part of his paycheck every week, and she had saved up enough money that they could actually open up a place. So in 1947, he opened this restaurant. By the time he opened, people had heard all about his fried chicken, and there was a long line around the block to try the fried chicken, which was awesome, or it would have been awesome, except for the fact that the stove stopped working. So they had no way to cook food on opening day. So what does he do? Robert picks up the phone and he calls Florine, who's at home. And she just starts cooking. Right at home, just starts cooking. And she cooks all the food there, but the car is over at the restaurant. So she has to hire a taxi and take the taxi to the restaurant. And they do that every day for about 2 weeks until they raise enough money to buy a new stove. So the place gets bigger. His brother James helps him run it. In 1959, they moved to a bigger space. And the next year, in 1960, they opened La Carousel Lounge, which is an integrated music venue. People like Lena Horne, Curtis Mayfield, Gladys Knight, Stevie Wonder, all these people come and perform there. They also know that there's only 2 hotels in the Atlanta area at the time that would serve African Americans, and neither of them were down by the HBCUs. So they opened a motor hotel in 1967, which had 120 rooms, a pool, ballroom, meeting rooms. And does anybody know where we're talking about? Have you guys guessed yet? I can't see, but I'm hoping somebody knew that this is Pascal's. So yes, so Pascal's was actually a big part of the civil rights movement as well. Dr. King had been eating there since he was a kid. And during the movement, he asked the Pascal brothers for some meeting space. And they actually gave him a suite in the hotel that he could use throughout the movement. And because they were by the HBCUs, when the students would get arrested during protests, they would bail them out from jail, give them a warm meal, a place to stay, and make them call their parents. So I think that's pretty fun. So now Pascal's is no longer in its original location. This is the new building, which is in Castleberry Hill. They also have spots at the airport. And if you want to eat what Dr. King ate, you're going to have to get the book, because in the book I have his favorite meal. All right, so the next one we're going to talk about, this is Mary Mckenzie. Now, Mary's husband died in World War II, and she had to figure out a way to support her family. One thing she was really good at was cooking, but unfortunately, in 1947, it was almost unheard of for a woman to own a restaurant. So instead of opening a restaurant, she opened a tea room. Now, her tea room became very popular, and at lunchtime, there'd be these really long lines, that were just around the block, super long lines, which was kind of a problem because people only have a certain amount of time for a lunch break, and then they have to get back to work. So she had to figure out a way to make sure she could serve all these people. So what she started doing is going up to people in line and giving them an order form. And they would fill out the order form while waiting in line, turn it in, and so by the time they actually got a seat, their food would be ready. Well, today the restaurant has over 500 seats, on the weekends and times you can still have to wait to get inside, and you still fill out your own order form when you go there. You don't fill it out outside anymore. Now you do it at the table. Anybody guess what we're talking about now? This is Mary Mac's. And so over time, they've opened up several different storefronts and combined them. If it's your first time going to Mary Mac's, be sure to let them know, because they'll give you a cup of pot liquor, which is the juice from when the collards are cooked. And it's really fun to dip your cornbread in the pot liquor. All right. The next one is one of the oldest restaurants that I talk about in the book. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of photos for this one, but this place opened in 1927, and this is a place where tradition was super important. So important, in fact, that the third owner, Jack Clark, when he decided to sell the restaurant in 1979, he took out an ad in the paper, and he told people if they were interested, they actually had to write an essay about wanting to own the restaurant, which is pretty unusual. This guy, Paul Jones, he had moved to Atlanta to work at the Cherokee Country Club as a cook, and he'd been wanting his own restaurant. So he thought he'd go check this place out. Never been there at all. So he takes his 9-year-old daughter, Jody, and when they're at the restaurant, all the waitresses are like, "Hey, hun, do you need anything, hun? Great to see you, hun. You know, hun this, hun that." And Jody was so confused because she's like, "Dad, I didn't think you'd ever been here before. How do all these women know you?" And it's just that kind of place where everybody seems to be a regular. I mean, there are tons of regulars there. In fact, the regulars are affectionately known as the gays and grays. But even if it's your first time, you're going to be treated like you've been there a million times. Well, before Jack would sell the restaurant to Paul, he insisted that they go on a road trip to Michigan to meet Paul's family because he really wanted to check him out. And so that's the type of place where tradition and personality is really important. Today, Jody runs the restaurant with her husband, and some of the staff have been there for decades. Sonia, the head cook, has been there for 40 years. Randall, the greeter, has been there for 32. And Ray has been there since 1972, which is 49 years. And I think a lot of the regulars have been coming just as long. Anyone know what we're talking about now? This would be the Colonnade Restaurant over on Cheshire Bridge Road. They're known for their fried chicken, but if you're an adventurous eater, I'd go for the fried liver instead. It's pretty yummy. Also, their bar is known for pretty strong pours, so it's a good place to drink as well. Here's another kind of classic place I feel like in Atlanta. This is Ann Price. Ann grew up in South Georgia. She was the fourth of 11 kids, and her brother says she was super bossy as a kid. After high school, she put herself through beauty school by working in restaurants. So her plan was to go on and be a beautician, but she found that she really liked working at restaurants. And so in 1974, she bought a Tasty Dog franchise. The only problem was her franchise was over on Memorial Drive, and there's a lot of fast food places around there. It was really hard for her to compete. Like, how do you compete with like McDonald's and places like that? Well, one of her customers really thought she should spice things up. He was like, "Hey, we live in the hood. Why don't you call it the Hood Burger or the Ghetto Burger?" And that's what she did. She gave her burgers these fun names. And in 2007, the Wall Street Journal said the Ghetto Burger was the best burger in the United States. Anyone guess where we're talking about now? This would be Ann's Snack Bar, which again is over on Memorial Drive. Ann was really, really famous for her rules. She was very serious. She had this list of rules of things you're not allowed to do in the restaurant. There's like only 8 seats. You weren't allowed to wait at the bar. There are just all these things that you couldn't do. She passed away in 2015, and some of her siblings now run the snack bar. Her rules are still there, and they still respect them, although they have loosened up on some things. Like now you can pay with a credit card, which is something you couldn't do before. And if you're wondering, the Ghetto Burger is a pound of beef, 2 patties, 2 slices of cheese, house-made chili, lettuce, tomato, onion, mustard, mayonnaise, ketchup, and bacon on a browned bun. All right. Now, I mentioned earlier that Atlanta is a city of transplants. So I want to share a couple of stories about a couple of people that moved to Atlanta. This is Jesus and Martha Lopez. They came to the United States from Mexico looking for a better life. In fact, they came over on Jose's motorcycle when Martha was pregnant. and they settled into a little area called Taco Town because there's a lot of Mexican immigrants living there. In fact, in their building, most of them were single men. And so Martha would actually cook food in her kitchen and sell them to the men, that were living in the building. And they did this for a while. In fact, they had 5 children. In 1994, they moved to a house on McDonald Street. And she continued to cook at home, although now they had space in the living room and dining room for people to dine in the house. And pretty much everyone who ate there was Latino, except for one guy. He was a white guy. He was a cop, and he loved the food. But he's like, guys, he was just worried that they were going to get in trouble, if people found out this was going on. So he really encouraged them to open a restaurant. And in 2000, they bought this old grocery store on Memorial Drive, and it took them 3 years to renovate. On opening day in 2003, they had a whopping 15 guests. But if you go today at lunch or at dinner, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a seat because this place is packed because the food is just amazing quality, it's reasonably priced, in huge portions. Martha makes the tortillas from scratch, and not just daily, but they make them to order. So they're always super fresh. And she'll do things like only make 10 chili rellenos a day, and when they're gone, they're gone. Do folks know where this is? Are folks guessing? All right, this would be Mi Barrio, again, which is over on Memorial. So you can kind of see it looks like an old grocery store. I didn't really realize that before. A couple of tips. One, you should tell them when it's your birthday because it will give you a shot of their very best tequila in a pretty adult shot glass. And also her red pozole, they only make on Fridays and Saturdays. Also, if you go in the afternoon or even sometimes around dinner time and they're closed, sometimes they just close because they're tired or they ran out of food. It's a really fun, small little family operation. One thing I love about Atlanta is this kind of marriage of cultures. And I think this place really speaks to that. So Jian was basically the Britney Spears of Korea in the 80s. She was a big K-pop star. But she got kind of burnt out by the fame and success there. So she moved to the U.S. with her then husband, and they owned a couple of restaurants. She didn't cook or anything. They just managed them. And after her divorce, she decided to go to cooking school because she loved the restaurant life, but always kind of had a hard time finding chefs that they really liked. So she went to cooking school at the Cordon Bleu, and then in her first restaurant job, she met Cody Taylor. And Cody had been working in restaurants since he was 15, and the two of them hit it off and started going on dates. And on their dates, she would take him to Korean barbecue places, introduce him to dishes like banchan, and he would take her to Southern American barbecue places and introduce her to meat in threes. And they started cooking together, and they would pull out ingredients from their shared pantry and really found that there's a great kind of connection between the spices used in Korean food, the spices used in barbecue, and they ended up opening up a barbecue joint together. And everything there kind of mixes these two cultures. So you might have a spicy Korean pork sandwich with a kimchi coleslaw and a cucumber banchan. Or there's miso and the collards and Korean peppers and the mac and cheese and their onion rings they use tempura for. And if you ask them what kind of style barbecue it is, because everybody always wants to know what style. Is it Carolina style? Is it, from St. Louis? They would say this is Atlanta style barbecue because it is this marriage of different cultures. So this is the Heirloom Market Bbq. It's next to a little liquor store, often have lines to get in during lunch hour. It is BYOB, so you could pick up something to drink next door at the liquor store. And there's no seating inside. And in fact, outside there's just standing room only. So it's good to get to go food from there. And you're actually right by the Chattahoochee River. So it's fun to pick up food and go there. All right, I've got one last story for you. This is Kevin Gillespie. I'm sure some of you guys recognize him. He was a finalist on Top Chef. He was also a co-owner and executive chef at Woodfire Grill. Woodfire Grill was on Cheshire Bridge Road. It was, white tablecloth, kind of place, very expensive. You could easily drop $200, $300 on a dinner there. And one day he was talking to his mom, and he said, "Mom, how come you and Dad never come to the restaurant?" And his parents were like super working class, and Sure, they couldn't afford a dinner that was going to be hundreds of dollars, but Kevin was an owner. He would have paid for them. Like, they wouldn't have had to pay anything. So we couldn't figure out, why are they not coming to eat here? Well, his mom said the reason why they don't go to eat at his restaurant is because his dad was afraid that they would embarrass him. And Kevin was just really crushed. Like, he hated to think that this restaurant, I mean, yeah, he knew it was expensive, but he didn't know it felt exclusive, that his parents felt intimidated to go there. So he wanted to create something really different. He wanted to create a place where there was amazing food, fine dining quality food, but in a casual atmosphere where everyone would feel welcome. And so instead of having white tablecloths and linen napkins, he had no tablecloths, and people used bandanas as their napkins. He also wanted to tear down the wall, both metaphorically and literally, between the kitchen and the customers. So he actually made it so that the kitchen is totally open to the restaurant. Another thing he did is he had the actual chefs who cook dishes bring them to the table, explain them to the customers, and the customers get to select what they want to eat. So instead of ordering from a menu, the chef would walk around and say, "This is what I made today. Do you want it?" And he did this for a couple of reasons. One is he knew that he was not going to be in the restaurant every day. He had several different restaurants at this point. So he wanted to figure out how to keep a really high quality of food without being there. And he also knew that at most restaurants, there's an executive chef who makes the menu, and then everyone else just kind of executes it. And he really wanted to empower the cooks and chefs there to do more. So they actually have this wall, and each person gets assigned one or two dishes. And it's like a type of dish, like you're doing shellfish and veg, and you're doing, red meat. And then those people the chef would like create their own dish and present it to everyone else, and at their family meal, and get feedback, and they'd be responsible for making that. And dishes change frequently, not only when ingredients change, because they cook with the seasons, but also one of his rules is if you're no longer in love with your dish, you can't make it anymore. You have to move on to something else, because he doesn't want his chefs, cooking things they're not totally in love with. So this, if people have guessed, I'm not sure, this is Gun Show. Gun Show's over in Ormwood Park. The reason why it's called Gun Show is because Kevin's dad worked 3 jobs, not 24 hours. He worked 7 days a week, 3 different jobs. And each month there was a flea market / gun show, and you'd always take off time to go to the gun show. And so when Kevin opened it, he said, "I know you'll go to the gun show, so no more excuses, Dad." This is an example of a place that has changed because of COVID. So now you need a reservation. It's a 10-course tasting menu. I believe the chefs still do bring out their food to you. And a little secret that I recently learned is there are a few tables outdoors that are first come, first serve, and you can order a la carte from the menu. I just did that last weekend with 2 friends, and we had a great meal. We tried one of everything on the menu, and it was actually pretty affordable. So those are a couple of stories I wanted to share. One thing I thought was really fun in the book is to go to some kind of unique locations. So I thought I'd just share a few of these with you. One place I think is super fun that I can't wait to take my niece and nephew to when they come visit is the Frosty Caboose over in Chamblee. It is a Missouri Pacific Rail train caboose that they moved in from Iowa, and now it is an ice cream parlor. So you just go up to the window, you can order sundaes, milkshakes, all sorts of ice cream. It's all local ice cream from Greenwood, and it's a really fun place. A neat thing about the location is it's right by the DeKalb Peachtree Airport, so you can see planes flying around. There is a rail line right behind it, and the road that it's on is a place for a lot of cars, like car salespeople, do their test drives. So if your kids are into plane, trains, automobiles, and ice cream, it's a really fun place to take them. Another place that is kind of a secret place that I love to take friends to, and one of the places I think you can get some of the best Mexican street food in Atlanta, is actually at the Starlight Drive-In. So if you go in the evenings, it's normal drive-in food for the movies, but on the weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays, there's a flea market. And at the flea market, there's a ton of great food. This is one of the food trucks that's there frequently. You can get all sorts of great Mexican street food. It costs like 50 cents to get in. It's a fun way to spend a morning shopping and eating. So I love taking folks there. And then another place that was new to me in writing the book is this place. Here, this is the 57th Fighter Group, and it is again by DeKalb Peachtree Airport. And when you drive up, you see these like abandoned World War II Jeeps, and it just feels like a really otherworldly, well, not otherworldly, but not, you don't feel like you're in Atlanta. In fact, it's set up to look like a French farmhouse that has been bombed during World War II. So you can see the damage up at the top. And when you walk in, there's like sandbags and there's World War II paraphernalia all over the walls. When you go to the bathroom, you hear Winston Churchill speeches. And I think the coolest thing about it is one whole wall is windows, and it overlooks the runway over at DeKalb Peachtree Airport. So you can watch planes take off and land. You can even ask for headphones, and on the headphones you can listen to the control tower. So that's a fun place that I think kids and adults will really like. Another thing I really tried to do when I was doing my interviews is I always asked people if there was any secret menu items, things that don't appear on the menu that we should ask about. And I found quite a few, and they're in the book, but I'll give you a teaser of a few of them. One is over at Ticonderoga Club. Every night before they close down the kitchen, they make a bunch of bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches, and they keep them in a warming drawer. And the reason why they do this is they want to make sure that people that work in the industry as bartenders, cooks, servers, dishwashers, that they have a place to go after hours and they can still get food. And so even though their kitchen is closed, they want to have some sandwiches there. They're not on the menu, but you can ask for them in the evenings. Another place for the secret menu is the Vortex. Their secret menu is on their website. To find it, you have to think like a pirate. So just remember, X marks the spot and look for their secret menu. And one last place for the secret menu is over at Sublime Donuts. They actually have a donut of the day on their secret menu. So those are just a few of the tips that I have in the book, along with the stories. And I've been talking a lot, so how about we do a little bit of trivia? I'm going to turn it over to ER for our trivia.
All right, so let me pull up our first trivia question.
Oh, and by the way, anyone can play. Just shout out answers in the book. It's if you've read it, that's great. You don't have to read the book to guess. The only person who cannot play is Terry Plumb, my father, who was my editor in the book. So I'm very, very grateful for him for being my editor. But I think he does know all the answers, so he cannot play.
All right, you heard it, Terry. No cheating. So our first question is, what food hall was formerly the home of Tyler Perry Studios? Answer in the chat if you know. Take a wild guess. All right, I see Krog. Anybody else want to guess?
What are people guessing?
So far, we have Krog Street. That's a good guess. I don't know the answer to this. You started us off with a hard one.
Okay, well, someone got the answer is Krog Street Market. It was actually Tyler Perry Studios for a while, and they actually made several TV shows and movies out of there.
Awesome. Good job. All right, so our next question is, which Cuban spot is credited as the first international restaurant on Buford Highway?
Are folks guessing?
Not yet.
Come on.
Take a stab, folks.
No one knows? Do you know, ER?
I don't know.
Do you have a guess?
I'm thinking of, somebody says Havana. Yeah, yep. two votes for Havana.
It is Havana Sandwich Shop. And it's actually used to be a Christmas tree lot. And that was the building on there. And yeah, that was the first restaurant that was today Buford Highway is known for its international fare, but Havana Sandwich Shop was credited as being the first international restaurant on Buford Highway.
All right. Good job, folks who got Havana. Where can you eat kangaroo on the bakes of the Chattahoochee? So we got 3 votes for canoe and 1 for Raised on the River. Raised on the River was going to be my guess too.
It was actually canoe. So their current chef is from Australia. So he added kangaroo to the menu. And it's something they can always get there as an appetizer. But there's a bar outside and it's beautiful. It's like right on the water. It's a great place to eat outside and it's beautiful.
Good to know. All right, so number 4 is where can you find a polenta party where the chef pours creamy polenta and tops it with assorted meats, veggies, Parmesan cheese, and olive oil.
So it's pouring it directly on the table, and you just eat off the table without plates. Has anyone done this?
Sounds delish.
Any guesses?
Spring.
Ooh, that's someone who knows me and knows how much I like spring. It's actually over at White Bowl. And so you can see they put kind of paper down on the table and then just pour the polenta down, put on veggies, put on meat, and there's no plates. You just dig in with your spoon or fork. I have not tried the polenta party, but it's definitely on my bucket list.
So White Bowl, which is in Decatur, right, on the square?
Yep, it's right off Decatur Square, White Bowl.
All right. Go check it out, folks. All right, so our next question is, what Atlanta institution earned its nickname because African-American farmers were not allowed to sell inside? Yes, the Curb Market, the Sweet Auburn Curb Market.
Yeah, so the official name is the Municipal Market because it is owned by the city of Atlanta. But the nickname is the Curb Market because African Americans those farmers were not allowed to sell inside, so they would sell outside on the curb. And that's where it got its nickname from.
So number 6, what burrito spot started as a weekend pop-up in a parking lot because Chef Hector Santiago was sick of the sense that food had to be served in a fancy restaurant to be considered good?
So these burritos kind of had a cult following for a while.
Is that the place that the last question, I'll read it again. The last question is, what burrito spot started as a weekend pop-up in a parking lot because Chef Hector Santiago was sick of the sense that food had to be served in a fancy restaurant to be considered good? So Pura Vida, it's Kiki's guess.
So
any other?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just trying to see if there are any other guesses, but I don't think so.
So Pura Vida was his restaurant, but it's actually El Burro Pollo. So he started doing that just on Saturdays in the parking lot. And it became this thing where people I remember going on Saturdays because I loved these burritos and it'd be a huge line. But he really did it intentionally. Like instead of putting on the Pura Vida menu, which was mainly tapas, he kind of did it outside kind of as a FU to the sense that you had to be in this like $1 million restaurant for people to want to go and eat there. He wanted to prove that you got really good, tasty food without, fancy decor and all the bells and whistles. And so he actually has spots now up at the Coda, and he has Super Pan in Ponce City Market and up at the Battery.
All right. What East Atlanta Village restaurant was the site of Toastergate in 2018? Toastergate. So I don't know what Toastergate is either. People are confused. Do you wanna tell us more about Toastergate, Amanda?
Toaster Gate was when Emerald City Bagels opened up. They did not have a toaster. They didn't want to toast the bagels because they're like, we baked the bagels this morning. This is how they're supposed to taste. They came fresh out of the oven. If you toast it, you're going to dry them out. You're not eating it the way we intended you to eat it. But a lot of people, including myself, love their bagels toasted. And so it became this thing in like the East Atlanta Facebook page and next door called Toaster Gate. Like, would they get a toaster? And they actually did cave, and you can get your bagels toasted. But originally you could not, and that was Toaster Gate.
Amazing. I had no idea. All right. So our next question is, what burger joint has a coronary bypass menu in which the burger buns are bacon grilled cheese sandwiches? So vote for the Vortex. Any other votes? The Vortex was my guess as well.
Yep, that would be the Vortex. So yes, the coronary bypass menu, all the buns are bacon grilled cheese sandwiches. And they're just like, it just gets bigger and bigger, and they're just kind of crazy if you look at the calories that go along with each of those. I've yet to try them. All right, two more questions.
Two more questions. Okay. So our next one is, what Philly cheesesteak joint started out in 2014 as a water ice stand in Dunwoody Shell Station, like a gas station? So Becky says Woody's, but I think Woody's started so much earlier. So I think this started in 2014. So I think this is newer than Woody's. Big Dave's, George says.
Steaks. And he's from Philly, and he really tried to make his cheesesteaks as good as Philly. He actually has a really great story that you can read about in the book. All right, last question.
Last but not least, what restaurant has 2 parking spots reserved for clergy? This is my number one fave hangout in Atlanta. Manuals, Busy Bees. The answer is, in fact, Manuals.
Everyone has 2 parking spaces for clergy. There was some local clergy that used to complain that they couldn't find parking there. And so Manuals took care of that and gave them spaces. So thanks for playing along with us. I just wanted to show just a few of the random things you will learn in reading Unique Eats and Eateries of Atlanta. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
And we want to encourage, if folks have any questions, you just got a lot of awesome information. But if you have any questions for Amanda, we would love for you to ask any of them in the chat or in the Ask a Question box. I'm going to just ask a couple questions real quick, and because our sound is a little garbled, I'm going to ask a question and then I'll unmute you, Amanda. So, but feel free to ask your questions as we're talking, folks, because we'd love to get community questions. So, Amanda, what was the thing that most surprised you in writing this book?
Well, I mean, honestly, so I started this book, I guess, about 2 years ago. And I took a little break when I started a new job. And then I took another break during the pandemic, because I didn't want to be calling up restaurants last March when they were shut down. But at some point, I had to get back to writing it. And I think one of the things that really surprised me was the ingenuity of the people that I was interviewing and just how resilient they were, coming up with new ways of doing food. People changed their models completely. Of all the restaurants in the book, only one of them has closed. And since then, the owners have opened up a new restaurant in the same location. That was a local which I like to call a disco Italian. And so I was amazed by how much people are willing to still talk with me. And we're still just, in this crazy time, really just committed to making things work in the Atlanta food scene.
So we have a question. What was a new place that you tried? Hold on one sec. Let me unmute you. Okay, go for it.
Several. So I'd never been to 57th Fighter Group. They actually have a really good burger because they use the trimmings from the steak and turn that into a burger every day. And a really luxurious beer cheese soup. So that was really exciting. I'd never been down to Virgil's Gullah Kitchen. So I grew up in Hilton Head, South Carolina, which is in the low country of the Carolinas where we have Gullah Geechee cuisine. So I kind of grew up with that, but they're the only place in Atlanta that I knew of that served Gullah Geechee food. So I was excited to try them out. I've never been to Masterpiece, which is a Szechuan restaurant, which is like always rated as one of the best Chinese restaurants in Atlanta. And I hadn't been there. I have since. And so it was really exciting to go to new places, but also meet the chefs. Like even places I'd been a million times, I didn't know the owners or the chefs. And so it was really cool to get to know their stories. And I think very few of them did I have any idea what the story was going to be going in. It was really just going with a lot of curiosity.
So Cynthia asked that thought she had heard that the Colonnade had closed, but is confirming that's not true.
They were closed during the pandemic, but they have since opened. In fact, that tomato aspic picture I took. So I went there a couple of months ago and had the tomato aspic. So I was like, I need to try this. It is like literally Bloody Mary mixed with gelatin. So it's like congealed savory tomato jello with a side of mayonnaise. I just like, where else can you find this like dish on a menu? It looks like it's straight off the 1950s. So they are back open.
So I will tell you, the Colonnade is my favorite restaurant in Atlanta, and my childhood birthday parties, like my 10th, 11th, and 12th, no, maybe 9th, 10th, and 11th, I had 57 fighter division.
Oh, nice.
So I was very excited to see both of those in the book. The next question.
Wait. What do you order at the Colonnade? What's your favorite?
Dark meat, fried chicken, fried okra, and turnip greens, and a million yeast rolls.
Nice.
Delicious. My next question is, what is your strategy? What is your ordering strategy when you encounter a new menu that you have never seen before?
Ooh, I really like that. So I always go for things I've never had before. If there's something I've never had before, like kangaroo or some sort of intestine, like at Deer and Dove, they have this whole like weird like parts menu. Actually, Holman and Finch has a parts menu too. Like I like to go for stuff that I've never had before, things that I know I can't make at home. So like you'll rarely see me order a salad out because I can make a good salad. But so I try to get things that I don't know how to make. And then I often ask the servers what they recommend. My pet peeve is when a server will be like, well, it depends on what you're in the mood for. I'm like, I just want to know the best thing you have here. Like my favorite kind of place to go eat is a place where they just like serve one thing and they just do it really well, you know? And that's why I love tasting menus, things like that, where they just like, this is what you're eating. And that's fine. Like I'd rather have that. I want to have what is your best dish.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's always interesting. I think there's kind of two kinds of eaters. People who just want to eat the same meal. They go to the restaurant because it has their standby and they just eat that every time they go. And then adventurous eaters who are like, sure, give me the offal. Give me like whatever, the tongue or whatever that's on this menu. That's fine. I'm here for it. So I think Betty might be your mom, Betty Plumb, asking, is it true you were thinking of opening a bistro called the Oxford Comma?
So the reason why she's saying that is because her husband, my father, Terry Plumb, was my editor, and he was a professional editor in the newspaper business. And one thing about newspapers is, space is money. It's very important. So they do not use the Oxford comma. So one thing I knew going into having my dad edit was he took out every Oxford comma, and I always had to put it back in. And so, yeah, I mean, that was something I had to do when I was a teen and he would read my papers in high school. So, and I'd be like, no, the English teacher says we have to use it. And we get in fights about it. But I just learned to know that like whenever I got something back from him, I'd have to add it back in. I think it's funny because I will say my dad used to talk about opening up a pub that was going to be called the Plaid Mallard. And when I was a kid, I loved to play restaurant. My restaurant was called Mousie's because it was run, the proprietor was a stuffed mouse of mine. I was the hostess, waitress, cook / bus girl, but the mouse actually owned it and was named after her.
That's really cute. So, okay, this is my last question. If you had 12 hours with somebody who's very chauvinistic about New York City or San Francisco, for example, being the best city, and you're trying to get them to move to Atlanta, Money is no object. You get 3 meals in 12 hours, so you can't be so stuffed like you have to eat 3 times, right? What 3 meals, what 3 restaurants or 3 meals would you take them to convince them not only to move to Atlanta, but that Atlanta is a superior food city?
Wow, that is an amazing challenge. So I think I'd want to mix it up with something very Atlanta, something very highbrow, and something kind of lowbrow. So for my very Atlanta one, my cousin was visiting from out of town this morning, and I took her to one of my favorite breakfast spots, which is Rhea's Bluebird. Rhea was an amazing larger than life character in our community, big heart of gold. Talk a lot about her in the book, and just I've always loved the huevos there, the bionic breakfast. It's right across from Oakland Cemetery, which was one of my favorite places in the city. And then I would go down to Nick's to Go, not on a Sunday because they're closed on Sundays, and not after 7 p.m. because we close at 7 p.m. But Nick's is just a Greek place. Like, it's a little stand where you walk in. It's only to go food, hence the name. I love just getting I really like their chicken, what do you call it, gyro there. And it's just like a kind of divey looking, but really amazing food. It's one of those places where like chefs go on their day off. And then for something kind of highbrow, one of my favorite places is Spring up in Marietta. Brian runs it. It's a tiny place, only I think 45 seats or so, and he normally just has 4 appetizers, 4 entrees, and 4 desserts on the menu, but everything is amazing. He makes everything, which is really unusual to have a chef that does the entrees as well as the desserts. He even does his own sourdough bread. I think it's a really it's not a pretentious place, but everything is excellent. So those would be my 3 meals, I think.
Awesome. Well, I think someone should want to move here for that. So this has been lovely. Thanks to everybody watching at home with us. You can click this teal button at the bottom center of your screen to buy Unique Eats and Eateries at Atlanta from Karis. It really does help us when you buy the book directly from us. You can also donate to Karis Circle, our nonprofit. It helps us pay for this platform and subsidizes some of our support groups and other things. So that is another great way to support us, and we really do appreciate that. No donation is too small. Amanda, as always, we are really excited to support you in all of your endeavors. We know that you're going to be doing lots of things around the city, so everybody keep an eye out. Tell your friends about this book. Obviously, don't just buy a copy, but let folks know about it. Make sure they know they can get it, and support your local restaurants. Particularly right now, coming out of the pandemic, this is such an important time to start going back to restaurants, tipping well, doing all the things, so that our vibrant and unique Atlanta restaurant scene can continue to thrive.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, guys.
Have a great day.